Dear listeners, welcome to episode 12 of Thinking Psychologist. The response about the Thinking Psychologist podcast has just been humongous. The topics that we have discussed till now, just to recap for all the new listeners over here, we look at science, how has science developed towards understanding human mind. We have looked at the singer of Old Man River Sunshine spoke about how mantras are able to bring you into the present moment. We have looked at people who tell us about lucid dreaming as a way to calm down your mind and tap into your inner subconsciousness. We've also looked at the clinical psychologist telling us how can we treat the anxiety and depression which is emerging in the modern era and try to enhance the power of mind, the beauty of mind. With that said, we have reached this far, and in the today's session we have got a really interesting guest with us. The whole idea of having this particular guest with us is how do we link exercise with mental performance and how to get them in sync. With us today, we have Craig Harper, who is Australia's leading presenter, writer, educator in the areas of health and high performance. He's been an integral part of Australian health and fitness industry since 1982. That is, a couple of years before I was born, even. So, without further ado, in today's session, we're gonna be learning more from Craig about his experience around human mind, exercise, fitness, and motivation. And with that, we would like to welcome Craig on the show. Craig, welcome to Thinking Psychologist, and we are delighted to have you.
Well, I'm delighted to be had, Ash. Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. You didn't need to tell everyone how old I am, but that's okay.
Craig, could you tell what has been your journey, Craig? Having so much experience and coming to this show, it's an honor for us to have you. What has been your journey? Who are you internally, and what do you do? And what can we expect from this discussion today?
Yeah, that's a nice question. So I guess I'll try and give you the 2 or 3 minute snapshot without boring everyone. But I grew up so I'm in Australia. Obviously, I live in down the bottom of Australia where we're still in lockdown in a place called Victoria, and I grew up in rural Victoria. I grew up in the country. Normal kid. I was a morbidly obese kid, though. I was the fattest kid in my school. So I dealt with lots of stuff around body image and self-esteem and confidence and, the psychology of, being being a fat kid and dealing with food issues and social issues. So that was an interesting start, although I wasn't really bullied or anything, but it was just, it was one of those kind of pivotal things in my childhood that led me into being really fascinated with the human body and food and exercise. And so I started working, I lost a bunch of weight. I started working in the fitness industry out of school. I didn't go to university till later. I first started working in gyms, as I think you said, in 1982. I was 18 years old. I started working in kind of high performance and with teams and companies when I was in my mid 20s around, like elite sport and coaching. And I started a thing called personal training, which is now a global phenomenon. I didn't start it globally, but I was one of, if not the first in Australia. I set up Australia's first personal training centre 30 years ago. So a standalone commercial facility for PT in 1990. And it's just been a journey since then, written a bunch of books, worked with lots of teams and companies, Olympic athletes, work with a really broad cross-section of humanity, from everyone from alcoholics and addicts who are trying to get their life together to corporations, to the government, to the police force, to the military, to just the average person, for want of a better term, who wants to think better, do better, create better. And for me, it's been a really interesting journey because I started very much planted in, when you work in gyms or when you work in the fitness industry or when you work with bodies, primarily it's a very physiological process. Eat this,
Mm.
micros, macros, move more, lift that, elevate your heart rate, stretch, repeat. And so it's very much about the body. Of course, I ended up doing a degree in exercise science. But then then you kind of figure out, well, actually changing my body is largely not about my body. Changing my body is actually an emotional and a psychological process with a physiological outcome. And so I started to, I realized really I didn't understand the science or the psychology, but I knew that there was something going on even when I was 19, 20. And I'm working with these human beings who they've got all the resources now. They've got all this equipment. They've got $1 million worth of equipment. They've got a gym membership. They've got a program. They've got encouragement. They've got support. They have all the resources they need, but they are consistently not doing it. And not only are they not doing it, many people were signing up for a year and lasting less than 3 months. And so the psychology of all of that interested me. And then I expanded that to not just beyond, not just with the body and with getting in shape or losing weight or getting fit or strong or whatever it is, or sporting performance, but more broadly, how come we make decisions that we don't follow through on? How come we say we're going to change stuff and we don't change it? And how come we say the same thing for 10 or 20 years and 10 or 20 years later, we're still having the same inner dialogue about the same issue? And so I became much more interested in humans than bodies. Bodies are interesting, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, nutrition, movement, all of those things are really interesting. But what's fascinating is the mind. What's fascinating is emotion. What's fascinating is the way that we humans operate and think and interact and connect and communicate and tell ourselves stories. And that's where I am at the moment, doing a PhD in neuropsychology and trying to figure all this stuff out and have a bit of fun along the way.
Awesome. That completely resonates with what this podcast is all about as well, Craig. It's all about trying to figure out what's happening inside. Like you said, even I have been the victim of having a 3-year gym membership signed up and hardly going there for a month. Now, coming to this particular point, Craig, now that we have started our discussion, why does that happen? Why do most of the diet programs that people do fail? Why do most of the people take those long-term gym membership and never go there? What is the basic reason behind people not following a strict regime? What's happening inside our head?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would just challenge you on one little thing. You're right. I know exactly. But you said why do diets fail? Diets don't fail. People fail, right? And it's but I know what you're saying. But and I don't even like the word fail. I'm just saying that people don't get where they want to go more often than not. And the question is, why is that? Why do we start things that we don't finish, right? And it's a great question. And this is integral to understanding how long-term change works, right? So there are a few reasons. One of the reasons is that there's a dichotomy of sorts, Ash. And what I mean by that is, on the one hand, we say something like, I want to be healthier, fitter, stronger, leaner, more productive, whatever it is, more efficient. We want that. But in order to create those outcomes, in other words, to build strength, build fitness, build resilience, build capacity, build skill, we need to work through discomfort, because that's where those things happen, right? But we're also hardwired for comfort. Mm-hmm. So this is the concurrent kind of reality for many people. On one hand, we want to be comfortable because we love comfort. Like, why do we eat food that we don't need when we're, food that we don't need, that our body doesn't need, junk food or high sugar food or whatever it is? Why do we do that when at the same time we want to be leaner or healthier or have a more functional body? And that's because when we eat that junk food or we have that soft drink or whatever it is, we get instant gratification, and we are hardwired very much for instant gratification. We love a quick fix, and we love whatever it is. And I'm not judging anyone by what they eat. And it's the same with alcohol or drugs or gambling or a whole range of behaviors. It's really about how it makes us feel. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is that quite often the things that we need to do to create that result, 1, it's not quick. 2, it's not easy. 3, it's not painless. 4, it's not fun. There's no instant payoff, and we love the instant payoff. So what we do is we we have this inner dialogue which goes something like, well, I'll have this bit of cake, or I'll do whatever it is, and I'll start tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes a 5-year journey or a 10-year journey. And then we wake up one day and we go, you know what, now I'm 40 years old and I've literally been telling myself a version of this story for 20 years. And so why do we self-sabotage? We self-sabotage for a range of reasons, but quite often it's because we love that instant gratification. And the change process, when we're talking about really changing thinking, habits, behaviors, psychology, physiology, outcomes, when we're talking about real change, I'm not talking about I got in shape, then I got out of shape, I gave up smoking, then I took it up again. That's not change. That's just a temporary break in behavior. When we're talking about lasting transformation, it needs to be an inside-out journey. And until we rewire the conscious and subconscious and unconscious to align with our goals and values, it's going to be a really long, arduous roller coaster of starting, stopping, peaks and troughs, up and down. And so the challenge is to get clear about what are the values, or what are the standards, or what are the goals that really matter to me? What are the things that I want to live up to daily? Not for a 12-week diet or a 4-week program, but what are the things that I feel like are going to be almost KPIs for my life and for my health and my relationships and so on, and to try to, step into that. And so, for example, I started training when I was the fat 14-year-old and I'm 57. And there's probably been 10 days over those years that I haven't trained. Now, that's not because I'm a maniac, although some would argue I am a maniac. And it's not because I'm super disciplined or I've got extreme willpower. It's because I've created a habit and it's hardwired into my operating system. And so I think this is one of the challenges for us, is to go, what are the sometimes behaviors, in inverted sometimes behaviors, that need for me to be all the time hardwired, non-negotiable habits, so that this is just me on autopilot. This is my new normal. So I don't need to get motivated anymore.
Craig, interestingly, I could very much relate to that. But you spoke about three parameters over here: the unconscious, the subconscious, and the consciousness. And in these three levels, you spoke about an inner dialogue happening between us, me and my friend, that I'll just have a small cake, I'll just have a small thing, it won't really hurt me. What are your views on that? Because, even if I'm running on a treadmill, that dialogue happened, let's just stop now. Or if I'm pumping on weights, that particular dialogue in our head that keeps coming in. And, we as a human, rational human beings should be able to take those decisions more seriously, right? Because in the end, it's affecting our life, health, wealth, how people perceive us. What's that inner dialogue?
Yeah. So cake is not the problem. It's the dialogue around the cake. So I think, and by the way, Ash and everyone else, it's not like, there's a 3-step plan for everybody. Everybody has a different mindset. Everybody has different physiology, different genetics, and different programming. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out, well, for example, with food, what's the best model for me? Not what's the best model for, my colleague or my friend or the guy across the road. What's the best model for me? And some people can eat a bit of, some people can integrate cake or whatever it is into their life, lollies or sugar-based foods or whatever, and they can be very strict and disciplined around that. The problem happens when we do something that opens a door in our brain that we should keep shut, right? So it's like you would not say to an alcoholic, now theoretically, that body can have a glass of alcohol. That's not going to derail the body. It's not going to destroy the body, but it's not about the body. It's about the psychology that lives in the body. So nobody's going to say to an alcoholic, just have one beer, because that's a trigger, right? Yeah. That's going to open a cognitive and an emotional and a behavioral door that we want to keep shut. And so everybody, for example, and whether or not it's socializing, or whether or not it's exercise, or whether or not it's food, or whether or not it's money, or whether or not it's work, we all have a personal relationship with each of those things. So for me, because my challenge personally has always been with food, I find exercise easy. I find building a business relatively easy. I find all the other things that I do, it's kind of me on autopilot. But for me, over the years, I spent, even when I lost weight, eventually I regained it, and then I lost it again. Then eventually, and so I was literally peaks and troughs till I was about 35. And even though I knew better, and even though I had an exercise science degree, and even though I owned gyms, and even though I was working with lots of humans and bodies, it didn't matter, because sometimes knowledge is not enough. Because if knowledge was enough, then that's why I always say these podcasts are brilliant, and having these conversations are very important. But what matters most is what we do with what we know, and what we do with what resonates, because transformation lives in the application of the information, not just the knowing. So knowing how to get in shape is not getting in shape. It's just knowing. Knowing how to build a $1 billion company is not building a $1 billion company. And so this is all about applied knowledge. But I feel like I digressed there. But
in a way, Craig, what you're hinting towards that living in the moment is much more important. Living by the day and not making a long-term plan, and having to take those small actions and be thoughtful about what you are eating, being mindful. Is that the way towards the transformation?
I think so. And I think it's about, I think having a long-term plan is good, but there is no, if we're going to we spoke before we started rolling about the spiritual and philosophical stuff. You think about this, the only moment we ever live is in the present, because when next Wednesday rolls around, it's not the future, it's just another installment of now. So there's I think the strategic of creating a plan, creating a timeline, accountability process, all of those things, I think that can coexist with being present in the moment. And so for me, when I talk, for example, about how to manage food, I get asked often, what's your philosophy around food? Do you like keto? Do you like paleo? Are you high carb, low carb? Do you like intermittent fasting? People wheel out all these models of eating. And for me, my model is to listen to my body, because my body knows. And so I just call it, being a conscious eater, which is, if I am genuinely hungry, I will eat. So, for example, right now in Australia, I don't have a clock in front of me, but it's about 4:30 or something like that in the afternoon. And I ate this morning at probably 7 a.m. And I haven't eaten since then. And the reason I haven't eaten is because I'm not hungry. And so your body, it's called biofeedback. Your body is very smart. My body lets me know when I need sleep. My body lets me know when I need food. Now, when you exist on junk, you lose that ability a little bit temporarily. And so the challenge for us is to be able to reconnect with the wisdom that is our cellular physiology, to be able to pay attention. And the question, so if anyone's listening and they have an issue with food, here's a really easy way to become more conscious around food. And that is, before you drink something, or before you eat something, before you put something in your mouth, be still, turn down the mania for a little bit, and just say to yourself, do I need this, or do I just want it? And that makes it really clear. Because we don't want to be obsessed with our body or food, but at the same time, we can't get another body. Like, this is it. That's the one you've got, I guess, depending on your belief system. But in this lifetime, that's the only body you've got. So I can get more money, and I can get another business, and I can get another house and another car, but I can't get another body. And so I think that one of our top 3 or 4 values should really be, and this is just is looking after that thing that you live in, so that will enable you to do life well.
Yeah, very well said, Greg. Very well said. And especially the point that you make once you're in front of the food, asking these two questions: Do I really need it, or I'm just wanting it? Because I believe most of the time we are just really wanting it, and especially Greg, I was reading through this Mr. Robert Wright, who is a social psychologist again, and he talks about how once I am consuming a piece of food in my mind, my brain is already thinking about having the next one. So I'm not really enjoying the one. And that is where living in a dream-like autopilot state is one of the reasons why, most of these, we don't really get to live a healthy life, and we just keep eating the junk food again and again and again. Is that right? What are your thoughts around this? In that moment of action, what is happening inside our head?
Yeah, I think so. I think often we almost eat unconsciously. We're in this because um, obviously we have to uh, obviously we have to eat, and it's a by the way, I still love food. I love eating. Don't worry, it's an integral and an enjoyable part of my existence. But um, there's a line between healthy and unhealthy eating, and it's important that we can, I think with a lot of things, Ash, not just with food, but in 2020, and I know it's a kind of different world this year, but nonetheless we're still busy, and sometimes we're really busy but not very productive, and really busy but not very efficient. We're just busy, and I think we do, and there's I don't mean there to be any criticism in this, just observation, but sometimes we're just caught up in this unconscious kind of humdrum existence where we kind of get up every day and we kind of do the same thing as we did yesterday, kind of have similar conversations, kind of have the same inner thoughts, kind of eat the same food the same way, kind of avoid the same issues, kind of, listen to only what works for us, confirmation bias, kind of. But in the middle of all that repetition, if we can hit the pause button for a moment and go, okay, so is this working for me? Does the way I live right now, in terms of whatever it is, with my job or my money or my relationships or my food or my self-talk, my habits, my behaviors, my lifestyle, is this really working? Because it's easy to live on autopilot, we do. And consciousness and self-awareness is opening this door where we start to become not obsessed with, but obviously more aware of us, more aware of our thinking, our choices, our behavior, our outcomes, our inner dialogue, where we slow down everything. My PhD is on self-awareness. Literally, that's what I'm studying. And it's really interesting how you can go through life pretty effortlessly being not particularly aware. Now, if in the middle of all of that you're for the most part happy, I would suggest don't change. I would suggest keep doing what you're doing. But if in the middle of that you are pretty often sad or anxious or disconnected or overthinking or fearful, or if that's a really regular occurrence for you, then you're not going to fix that in 10 minutes. That's okay. But maybe there are some things that we can do about the way that we do life. Maybe we can, over time, create a new operating system or create a new normal with whatever the problem is, whether that's food, whether that's communication, whether that's, I have a job that pays great, but I hate my job. Yeah. Okay, well, do you want to do something you hate for 40 years? Well, not really, but it pays well. Well, guess what? You might have lots of money, but you'll be spiritually, mentally, and emotionally bankrupt. So don't yeah, we need money. Yeah, we've got to pay the bills. Yeah, we've got, there's a commercial reality to the human experience, of course. But there's lots of things that are, critical parts of the human experience, not just am I paying the bills.
One thing that I can relate to, coming from mental fitness and physical fitness, the domain, Greg, from your experience, every person that I have spoken to in my podcast till now has spoken about one same thing, that we as human beings are stuck in a rut and most of our lifetime is spent on autopilot without even realizing that we are doing it again and again and again. Being lost in the thoughts of past or the future and not being able to stop for a moment and think about what we are doing is actually what is, is like living inside a matrix, and wherein you are living in a dream world, and once you stop and think about this dream world, the realities try to break. But the interesting part that I have realized, Craig, is that the dream pulls you back in. The moment you leave that thought of realization that you are living in a dream world, the dream will again pull you back in. And then we have this small voice inside our head which is always, pushing you down. Sometimes it pushes you up as well if we are able to tame that, but most of the time it pushes you down. Now this brings me to the fundamental question again, coming from the physical fitness part of it. How does how will a person peak his performance, physical performance, once he picks up a exercise regime? And like we spoke about food, think about it. Do I really want it or need it? Once I'm hitting a treadmill or once I am on a swimming, swimming streak, how do I manage my mental thought process once I'm doing it, and how do I tap into that inner voice to make it favorable for me?
Mm. So over time, we touched on this a little bit before. Same with food, same with exercise. Over time, that thing needs to become, firstly, what I say to people is identify the behaviors that are in line with your goals and your values. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if I said to you, Ash, is health one of your values? What would you say?
No, say yes.
And if I said, is healthy eating one of your values?
I can say that yes, somewhat.
Right? I'm not saying what's your current operating
Yeah.
system. I'm saying your values, right? So it's pretty easy to get clear on, is one of your values being a decent human? Yes. Is one of your values kindness and compassion? Yes. Cool. Right. So I call our values our internal sat nav, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your values are your guidance system for life. Now they could be religious values, spiritual values, health values, you know, um, relationship values. And what getting really clear about our values does, it makes it much easier for us to identify the behaviors that will support those values or make those those values livable. So, like, for example, when I say, well, look, it's really important to me that I optimize my physical health, then clearly there's a whole bunch of things now that I won't do. And it's not because I'm obsessed, or it's not because I'm an elite athlete, or it's not because I'm a weirdo. It's because I can't eat junk food and drink alcohol and take drugs and abuse my body and be healthy.
Yeah.
So all of those things are off the table for me. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's a personal choice. They might be on someone else's table, and that's fine. There's no judgment, because all of this is about us coming to an awareness of what really matters to me. That's the first thing. What really matters to me. Then around that, what are my values? See, here's the thing. If in your mind you are constantly trying to get in shape, or you're constantly trying to lose weight, you're in a temporary paradigm of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we want to do is we want to say, no, I need to change the way that I manage my body permanently. I don't want to do a weight loss program. I don't want to do a diet. I don't want to do a body transformation kick for 8 weeks. I don't want to do an online let's get in shape before Christmas thing. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to change my default setting around food, around lifestyle, around exercise, so that I am, whatever my genetic potential, whatever my chronological age, I am the best version of me physically that I can be. Not for
Mm-hmm.
my ego, not because of vanity, but because when my body operates well, then life is better. It's not
Right.
all life is about, but that's when I'm strong and healthy, then my brain works better. When my brain works better, my mind works better. When that works better, I'm a better coach. I'm a better teacher. I do podcasts better. I learn better. I'm a better student. I'm more aware. I'm more humble. I'm more appreciative, right? And so all of these things, body, mind, spirit, emotion, are integrated. And so what's the answer? The answer is you have to want it enough. If you're more, you have to get to that point where you go, am I going to do this? Am I going to go around in circles with eating and exercise and weight loss and weight gain and health improvement and health decline? Am I going to go around in circles with this for the next 10 or 20 years? And if the answer is, well, I definitely don't want to, then whatever you've been doing that doesn't work, right, which is starting and stopping, that needs to be out the door forever. But the challenge, Ash, is that this idea of forever terrifies people. Because the idea of complete and total commitment scares people because we like a get out of jail card.
Yeah, sure. I can totally relate to that. Yes, great. And this, yeah.
So it's, but another thing back to what you were talking about before is you think about this, I don't know how many people are going to listen to this, but let's be really optimistic and say, let's say 10,000 people listen to this episode of yours right now. So there we've got 10,000 individuals, 10,000 personalities, 10,000 backgrounds, 10,000 experiences that they bring to this moment in time listening to you and I talk, right? Now, the interesting thing is, even though everybody's got the same information being presented to them, everybody's got the same inbound stimulus into their ears and brain, nobody's having the same experience, right? So then that brings us back to, well, what is reality then? Like how do I create my own reality? Because if your story, for example, if your story around exercise is boring, exercise is not fun, exercise is painful, exercise is whatever, fill in the blank, then that will be your experience.
Yeah.
Because your body believes your mind, your emotions believe your mind. When you say to yourself, I'm in danger, even though you may not be in danger, but if your story is I'm in danger, then all of a sudden there's anxiety, there's fear. If there's anxiety and fear wrapped around a story of danger, now we've got physiological buy-in. Now we've got elevated heart rate and blood pressure and breathing and, stress hormones, sympathetic nervous system, endocrine system, right? The mind is literally the control center for our life.
Yeah. The reason, Craig, now that you bring this, the reason for having this podcast name as a thinking psychologist is I totally believe that we as a human, our life and our existence, it starts from this word thinking. So if, for example, a young child sees a tree for the first time, what happens there? He thinks, what is this? And then he figures out and someone tells him this is a tree. And the next time he sees it, it goes into their subconsciousness. So our human existence is everything about what we are looking at the things for the first time, what we think about it. And as you said, if my story around going to a gym is negative, I'm thinking a negative thought and my story is negative around it. So my thought, feeling, and actions are always going to be in sync. If I have a negative thought, it's going to lead me to negative feeling, and then my actions are always going to be negative. So thinking on those lines, I think you are very, very correct in saying that the story around the thing that you want to do needs to be positive in order to have a positive feeling and a positive action towards it. But the correct, what in my personal experience, I'll tell you, I understand that I need to be fit, I need to be eating fit, and, I need to achieve a long-term goal of staying fit and healthy. But this particular thinking process tends to stay for a very, very momentary time period. So the constant reminder of being healthy, if I do it for a week, for example, and then the motivation slowly dies down, and then again you go back into your rut. How do I get out of that trap of, having that constant reminder back in and, having like a Forrest Gump kind of a thing that you're always motivated and running behind a particular goal? That in reality doesn't really shape up for most of us, I believe.
100%. So then firstly, I want to ask you a couple of questions, you psychology student, you. is motivation permanent? Motivation, the feeling, is it permanent or temporary for most people?
It's temporary for most people.
Right. And what that means is if we only do the thing we need to do when we're motivated, the behavior will be temporary, right?
Yep.
So the real question is not how do I stay motivated? The question is how do I stay proactive and productive and effective when I'm not motivated?
Right.
Right? Yeah. That's the question. People always understandably ask that how do I stay motivated question, and my answer is you don't. Right? That's normal. That's not weak. That's not bad. That's not flawed. You're just like me, Ash. I don't stay motivated either. If it was all about staying in the zone and excited and pumped and motivated and inspired, I'd never get anything done, right? So This is about if you want to be a high performer, whatever that means to you, but that comes down to quite a few things. But one of the things that matters is your ability to be able to persevere and to be able to keep grinding and doing the work when most people would have given up by now, or when perhaps previously you've given up. And so that's the challenge. The challenge is not to be inspired and motivated daily, because that's virtually impossible. The challenge is to be consistent in the absence of motivation. And this is what's not spoken about enough or not understood. And that's, so I'm going to give you a very practical answer. So if you said to me, Craig, I've gone round in circles, I've lost weight, gained weight, joined gyms, stopped gyms, rejoined, started, eaten well, eaten bad, and now here I am. However, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
36.
Okay, and now I'm a 36-year-old guy, right? Here I am, right? So I would go, right, that doesn't make you bad, that doesn't make you weak, or that makes you kind of like almost everybody, that makes you human, including me. And so what I'm going to do, Ash, is I'm going to help you, and let's create some structure, let's create some process, let's create a plan, let's create a strategy, let's create a timeline, so that now you've got a framework to work within. Because motivation in the context of this discussion is an emotion. And so let's turn down the emotion and let's turn up the strategy. So now you have a plan, you have a strategy, you have accountability, you have a timeline, you have KPIs. Now we've turned it into a project.
Yeah.
Now we're turning your health, wellness, whatever it is you're eating, into a project. And so that over time, what happens is that you become habitually sewn into these movements. And that's why when someone says, and I don't know if you've gone down this road in your research, but when someone says, how long does it to change a habit? It's a ridiculous question, because there is no answer to that, because everybody is different. Every behavior is different. And there are so many variables around that. But my experience is, just working with thousands of people over decades, is that quite often it can take a year or two or three for somebody to really rewrite a program, rewrite an internal program, and really change an operating system. So this is now normal, because you don't want to have to spend the next 70, how old are you, 36? Let's say you've got another 60 years. You don't want to spend the next 60 years trying to be motivated, trying to be disciplined. One, it's exhausting, and two, it's impossible. But it also, you spoke about, when we're introduced to something new for the first time, we tell ourselves a story about it. And so you would have come across a term in your research and study called metacognition, I'm guessing. Yep. So when, in general terms, we're just talking about how we think. We're thinking about thinking. And this is something that I don't know about in India, but in Australia, we're not really encouraged to do that much, because it's like everything's just on autopilot. And it can be a little bit confusing, but, depending on, again, what research you look at, but we have, some people say 70,000 thoughts a day or thereabouts. We have a lot of thoughts anyway. And a lot of those we're not even aware of. It's just busy in there. But it's about largely kind of coming back to center and saying, well, where does this thought come from? Is this thought true? Is this crazy? Is this helpful? Is this hurtful? Is this a destructive self-belief thought? Is this And again, that is another expression of self-awareness, and it's trying to identify, because sometimes what gets in the road, in fact, more often than not, what gets in the road is not power or potential or possibility, but rather thinking. And I know for me, when I can get my thinking out of the way, I've got lots of potential.
Yeah, completely agree. Craig, are you a sort of a fan of Buddhism?
Yeah,
No.
I very much like the Buddhist philosophy, and I grew up in quite a religious environment, which I'm not religious anymore, but I have a strong kind of value around spirituality, and yeah, I love the Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah, the reason I bring this up is, I believe Buddha was the one of the top psychologists of his era, because he was exactly talking about thinking about our thinking and how our world becomes what we think. And as you said, the experiences around people listening to this podcast would vary, because it is us just sounds that are reaching us, our conversation, but the picture that they would be painting in our head about the things that you're talking about, like once you said that you going to the gym, Ash, the person might be thinking himself going to the gym, his experience around the gym, his stories around the gym. So what we think is how our world becomes, and we create the world in that way. And having a strategy around it, Craig, I think that is the way to go towards it. And then a regular look back at that strategy, if I'm following it correctly or not. Is the regime too correct or too strong or too light, and what's happening around me? Second thing, Craig, what I believe is that, once we consume food, it's an instant gratification, as you spoke about the dopamine rush that happens. Similarly, once I achieve something, those instant rewards that happen, that I have lost 1 kg, 2 kg, 3 kg, celebrating those small wins as well, I believe is a path to take it forward. Although, I am not the right person to speak about it. During this lockdown, I have gained like 4 or 5 kgs again. I pushed it down, quite a bit, about 10 kgs, but again it has went up. So very similar to like what happened to you. There were so many ups and downs, but that was the reason I brought this up. You tend to get into that rut of life again, and you lose that, the framework, the structure, everything goes back into the closet, and then you lose that touch. But very right, we need to have a strategy around it.
And like I always say to people, for example, what matters more to you, your health or money? And we need both, of course. And we're not anti-money, but I'm generalizing, but we can be so obsessed with all things external, and I don't want to go too deep or philosophical, but I kind of talk about the duality of the human experience, and that is we kind of do life in this physical three-dimensional world with with weather and government and COVID and jobs and money and other humans, and that's kind of where we do life, is in this three-dimensional plane. But where we do most of our living is that internal non-physical plane of thought and idea and purpose and passion and truth and excitement and joy and pain and fear, and and it's trying to manage that external. Well, I've got to go to work, I've got to put petrol in the car, I've got that event on Friday night, I've got to get to the gym and lift a few dumbbells. It's trying to co-manage that with my mind and my emotions and my passion and my drive and my values and my goals. And I think all of this is about coming back to a more consciously lived life and being aware of, this is not real. This is just my version of real. This is not what's going on. This is just my story about what's going on, which is why you can have 20 people in the same room at the same time on the same day. And while they're all in the same room, none of them are in the same experience.
Yeah.
And this is because an experience is an internal thing, a room is an external thing. And when you open the door on this and people go, oh, that's so true, and a really good conversation to have, is just that one around, the fact that all of us, you, me, in this moment right now, everybody listening to this podcast as they do, in the moment that they hear these words, the realization and the recognition that I have been programmed my entire life by my family, my friends, my religion, my spiritual pursuit, the media, the social media, my job, every conversation, every inbound stimulus in some way has shaped me to some extent. And now here I am in this moment on this day, and I look at the world through the window of that experience and that programming and that conditioning. I look at the world and I process all this inbound data through my fears and my values and my biases and my passion and my drive and my excitement. And so I am, without even being conscious, I'm creating my own experiences in real time. And then when you become aware of that, you go, oh, wow, maybe I don't need to change my life as much as I need to change the way I process my life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that realization, Craig, I believe you would have that realization. And once you realize that it's a matrix, it's a filter on top of what experience that we are creating, it's quite of a very liberating feeling. Saying that I've been wrong all my life. It's just been that programming, and if I could correct that programming, the opportunities are immense. It's endless opportunities. Coming on that point, Craig, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts around meditation? My personally, I have been involved into mindfulness meditation recently. I have picked it up. I've been doing a lot of meditation. And one of the things that I believe is that rather than looking outside for answers, there are a lot of answers inside us. Sitting back and trying to calm down your mind to look inside is actually would make our world a much better place. The incessant chatter that keeps happening in our head, once that calms down, you start to see the world in a different place. That is why I've started to, over Instagram, if I follow you, I keep posting things about make meditation cool again. In India, the meditation was the mainstream of what students used to teach got taught in Gurukul and stuff. But as a society has evolved, all these external distractions have been taking us much more away from what reality is, what peace inside our head is, not outside. What are your thoughts around meditation?
Um, I think meditation is crucial. I think it's really underrated and undervalued, and I think it's incredibly powerful because it's in that meditative state, it's in that space of still and calmness and clarity that sometimes the great stuff happens. It's
Yeah.
and meditation doesn't have to be sitting on the floor with legs crossed. Meditation can be in nature, meditation can be walking, meditation can be, I live 800 meters from the sea, and I often just go and I just sit. There's a little wall there, and I just sit and I look at the bay, and I just clear my mind, and I consciously don't think. I consciously try to empty that space, and yeah, it's amazing how restorative that is, and it's amazing how not only is it great from a mental and emotional perspective, but it slows down my physiology. And I think the person that says they're too busy to meditate is the person that needs to meditate the most. And look, do you know it? Like that's
Yeah.
and look, I'm definitely no expert in this space, Ash. You've probably well and truly got me covered, but for me, it's that being able to, be still and be okay in the still. And I think I'll tell you an interesting story. I'll try and be quick, but my life was manic. It's not manic anymore, but when I was about your age, a little bit younger, I had 5 businesses and I had over 100 staff, and I was making lots of money, and business was great. And, and from the outside looking in, my life was very successful, and very successful for the ex-fat kid from the country anyway. But I would never sleep. I would every night I would wake up 10 times a night. I would have a notepad by my bed. I would write notes. I would go back to sleep. I'd wake up. I'd write more notes. And I always had, and it was just my mind and my emotions were just chaos. So from the outside looking in, I was successful, but the inside out experience was one of chaos and discontent and stress and anxiety. And I finally got to this point, and I was never alone. Well, I was alone, but I was never not busy. I was never I was around people, or if I was at home alone, I was never still and it was never calm. And even though things were going great, things weren't going great. And I reckon I almost had a breakdown. And one day I just got up and I'd had another sleepless night, and I'd written pages of notes through the night of things that I had to do and problems I needed to solve and conversations I needed to have and, ideas I needed to develop and all of this stuff. And I thought, I can't do it. And so I went to work and I said to my then assistant, I'm going to go away. I'm going to go to Queensland today. And Queensland is at the top of Australia for those people who haven't been to Australia. And it's kind of warm and sunny and gorgeous. And she looked at me like there was something horrendously wrong. And anyway, the not so quick version is I went away and I spent 10 days by myself. And I didn't have a phone call. I didn't do any work. I didn't read a newspaper. I didn't watch television. I didn't look at a computer. And I consciously made myself be still. I consciously wanted to get in touch with me. I consciously chose to step out of the busyness and the mayhem. And I kind of thought then, I'm probably about halfway or nearly halfway through my life. What do I want the second half to look like? Because I don't want it to be like this. And for the first day or two of stillness, I absolutely hated it. I was so terrible at being still. And I was sad and I was lonely and I was disconnected and I was constantly looking for a distraction. And it took me 3 or 4 days to be okay with being still and okay before I really started to calm down. And I would go, and I was right across the road from a beach and the ocean. I would go to the beach and I would sit in the sand. And it took me about 5 or 6 days to calm down. And by the time I had to come home, first day or two, I wanted to come home. Last day, I didn't want to come home. And it kind of taught me a lot about me. And I'm still a work in progress, but, for me, it's really important that I have an off switch. It's really important that I can step out of the chaos, because my life at times is busy and chaotic, not in a destructive way, but it's really busy because I'm doing full-time study and full-time work. But I have an ability to meditate now. I have an ability to turn that switch off. I have an ability to be in the still and be in the calm and not only be okay with it, but to revel in it. And I think it's long-winded answer to your question. I think it's invaluable.
Yeah, that's so true, Craig, so true. And even once I relate to your experiences, my experiences have been the same. The the confusion in the head, thoughts, just random thoughts rambling you and keeping you lost all the time. Once I started to meditate, sort of it became so calm and quiet. And it was such a nice experience looking at the thought. And my day in day out job involves developing new products. So I'm into the innovation and incubation. And once we develop new products, you have to have a long-term strategy around the business plan. You would already know. Doing the meditation has actually helped me build those strategies around that together. How will I scale this business? What do my customers need? And I'm able to put that in all well together. It has actually helped me out in a lot of different ways. That is where I started to speak with a lot of the clinical psychologists. Then I started to look at Buddhism. I had looked at with the Taoism. I've spoken to Hindu priests as well. What is it all about chanting mantras? What is it all about sitting in a calm place? They're all talking about the same, just one thing, like you mentioned, having an empty mind at some point of the time. And our brain changes as well. Our brain changes rapidly. If you're just able to stop those thoughts for a certain moment, our brain changes. We become more in the present, a little bit more out of the matrix, in order to look at the world much more clearly. That's what the bottom line is, Craig. And I believe this thing should be spread out more. It should hit our mainstream of the schools and colleges, where we are asked to look inside more rather than just looking outside in Instagram and Facebook. Because the fight is for attention. I was speaking with one of the evolutionary psychologists, Craig, and he talks to me and says that, we as humans don't see the world clearly. The reason being is our evolution has been in a way. And if you think yourself as an alien who has designed human beings and you want them to be autonomous, you would want them to be busy. You would want them to be running behind unrealistic pleasures so that we reciprocate our genes further. So our coding has been like that. And once you figure out that algorithms and coding, that is where you realize, oh, we have been designed in a way. And that is where the knowledge of the matrix happen. And I believe meditation is one way to get out of that thing. Although there should be I think this is a very small piece of the puzzle of the meditation that we're talking about. There is much more to this puzzle that we don't really look at it and think about it. But you still got to feed the family, you still got to be busy over here, busy over there, earn money and all that stuff. But the word should get out there. That's what I believe. Meditation should become cool again. People should see the world much more clearly. That's what I believe, Craig.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, there's been a really, especially in kind of, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, there's been a perpetuation of what I believe is a massive lie. And the lie is that success is about stuff. Success is about what you have and what you earn and what you own and what you drive and what people think of you and your brand. And as you said, you've got to pay the bills and all of those. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. But if we want to get a bit religious and spiritual again, there's in lots of the text, it talks about, in the Bible, it talks about money, and people misquote this. They say money's the root of all evil, but the actual scripture is the love of money is the root of all evil. So things are not bad. Things are not good or bad. They're just objects, but it's our relationship with them that creates this dependency, that creates this urgency, that creates this unhealthy kind of drive. And so for me, it's about, as you said, it's about managing the external practical realities of being a human, which is, I need a car and a house, and I need to feed my kid, of course. And by the way, live in a great house, live in a big house, but don't confuse what you have with who you are. There's a big space, and even when we come back to the construct of thinking, thinking in and of itself, thinking can be positive and negative. It can be healthy and unhealthy. There's a point in time where thinking about something switches from productive and constructive to destructive and unhealthy. Now we're obsessed. Now we're, and so even that is that constant challenge of managing the mind, which is, as I said before, that's the ever-present kind of task for humans, isn't it? Managing our mind, managing our thoughts, which therefore managing choices, behaviors, and outcomes.
Yeah. This is I completely went with the flow, correct? Because we started to resonate at the same thought process there, so that was going really well. And looking at the time, Craig, we are about to hit roughly an hour. So, and the attention span of the listeners to have a good experience needs to be roughly around 40-45 minutes. And I see a lot of people tend to drop off after that. So keeping that meaningful, we will like to do a quick summary of what we have discussed. I'm going to do a quick summary, and then I'm passing the ball to you to do a quick summary. And with that, we will call this off. So doing a quick summary for our listeners there, what we learned today is that having a strategy around a weight loss or having a strategy around being fit for the long term is the way to get fit or do a weight loss or to gain weight. Motivation is a temporary emotional feeling. In order to have a strategy around the weight loss, we need to be coming into the present, have a long-term goal, but every time we stand in front of the food, asking those two questions that Craig mentioned, do I need it or do I really want it? Secondly, listening to your body in the present moment that you are, getting away from that autopilot and listening to your body about those indications. Am I really hungry? Sticking to a plan as a strategy on where am I going, what am I doing, and having a good story around where am I going. If I'm going to work out, if I'm having a negative story, that will never work out. Having a positive story around the place where I'm going and having a vision of a beautiful future around that story is the one that's going to really help. Secondly, the living in the moment, as Craig as well, confirmed our hypothesis around that we don't really see the world clearly, and living in autopilot and meditation as a way to get out of that matrix. That I believe is a brief summary of what we have discussed. I'll give the ball to Craig to do a quick summary as well, please.
Thanks, Ash. That was fun. I appreciate you having me on the show. Good luck with it. Yeah, I think you covered it really well. I think, that part of the journey of personal growth and spiritual growth is, it's about being aware, and it's about being courageous, and sometimes stepping into the things we don't want to step into, and being humble and being honest and being able to, I say look up, own up, step up. We can't get good at the things that we avoid. It's like, if I said, who wants to build resilience? Everyone goes, me. And I go, well, how do you build resilience? You build it in the middle of discomfort. That's where you build it. How do you get better at something that you're not good at? Well, you do that thing that you're not good at, or that thing that scares you. And so, my advice is, if something resonated today and you need to change something, or you want to change something, practical about that. Be really strategic about that. And if that is something that you've stopped and started several times, and you have a record of doing it and undoing it, don't panic about that, but just recognize what your triggers are and create a process for you, and an accountability system for you, and a blueprint for you that makes it more likely that you will keep going when you once would have stopped. My last thing is, don't try and change 20 things at once. There's lots of research that tells us that trying to reinvent your life and all of those associated destructive habits and behaviors, in a very short time doesn't work. So identify one or two key things that for you really want to try. You really want to, you might say, you know what, off the back of what Ash said, I'm going to meditate every day for 5 minutes. That's it. I'm starting with 5 minutes. Week 2, I'm going to do 10 minutes. Week 3, I'll see how I'm going. Maybe I'll do 15 minutes. But what you're doing there is, in a day that's constructed of 1,440 minutes, you're saying 1,435 minutes, I'm not meditating. But 5, I'm going to. So what we do is we start with something that's doable. And when we start slowly and we build, we're more likely to maintain over the long term. And it's like same with fitness. Same with writing a book. How do you write a book? You write a word, you write a sentence, you write a paragraph. It turns into a book over time. How do you get in shape? You go for a walk. You do 3 push-ups. You do 3 squats. You don't go to the gym 30 times a week straight up and train like an Olympian. You build into it. And so, we want to be driven by passion and emotion when it's available, but we want to be governed by strategy and logic and process.
Superb, Craig. Thanks for all those tips. I truly believe that the people who have listened to this podcast today would have gained a lot of insights into how to manage your overall fitness, the place where we live in, how to manage it properly, and how to get mind in sync with our fitness. With that, Craig, I'd like to take your leave. Thanks again for spending more than 1 hour with us. It was really enlightening, and I, appreciate you coming to the Thinking Psychologist podcast show.
It's been a pleasure, Ash. Thank you very much for having me.